So Daniel Dubois knocks out Trevor Bryan in 4 rounds. The production was typically bizarre, as you'd expect with a Don King show, with flag waving all over the place, a million people in the ring before the fight, and all this carry on. Carl Frampton said it was like a Monty Python sketch. Now, as for the fight itself, Trevor Bryan was looking like Uncle Phil from Fresh Prince in there, tiptoeing around the ring like Uncle Phil creeping to the fridge at 2 a.m. for a midnight snack. That's how he looked. And he got accosted by Daniel Dubois, who was Jeffrey. You know, in the Fresh Prince, when Jeffrey would always catch Uncle Phil doing something he shouldn't be doing, and Uncle Phil tries to explain his way out of it, even though Jeffrey works for him. Well, that's how Daniel Dubois was. He caught Uncle Phil red-handed. So I'll leave the Fresh Prince analogy there. Dubois was hitting Trevor Bryan with solid jabs right away. Bryan, if you want to give him any kind of credit at all, because it was a horrible performance, but if you want to give him any kind of credit at all, you could say, well, he made himself an awkward target for Dubois' right hand. He was getting hit with the jabs, but he did kind of manage to nullify or somewhat nullify Dubois' right hand. But Dubois was like, that's okay, I got a left hook. And the left hook that ended the fight was actually attempted several times earlier in the fight. In fact, it was attempted several times earlier in the same round, in that 4th round. And Dubois just adjusted the trajectory, he adjusted the timing and the distance, and he caught Trevor Bryan by surprise with it. He went down on his face, and normally when a fighter goes down face first, they don't get up. And when Trevor Bryan was laying there, I was thinking to myself, would he even be able to get up and beat a count of 10, even if he hadn't been hit with a punch? You know, like, can Trevor Bryan even do one push-up? I'm not certain, to be honest with you. I wouldn't put any money on it. So, yeah, he didn't manage to get up after the big left hook. And that's all she wrote. Daniel Dubois becomes the WBA regular heavyweight champion for whatever it's worth. So I thought it was a good performance. I thought Bryan was every bit as bad as most people thought he was going to be. I had said pre-fight that Bryan is maybe not quite as bad as people think he is. And I would stand by that when Bryan's actually in any kind of shape. Because, as I say, you saw in there that he does have some ability to avoid shots and, you know, make himself awkward. But the thing about it is, you can't give someone like Daniel Dubois, who hits as hard as he does, too many free shots. Even if you've got a little bit of slick upper body movement and some veteran defensive moves like Bryan has, you can't just let a guy keep teeing off on you, you know, and just throwing free shots at you. You have to deter him in some way. You have to throw something back to keep him honest. It can't just be one-way traffic, you hoping to slip and slide your way to the second half of the fight where you think you're going to be able to take him into deep waters and drown him. Nah, you need to throw something back, because eventually one of those big shots that he's winging at you is going to land. And in the heavyweight division, it's not like the welterweight division. In the heavyweight division, one punch is often all it takes. And that's how it was in this fight. One left hook, and Trevor Bryan was done. So, yeah, really poor tactics there from Trevor Bryan. He should have thrown something to try and keep Dubois off of him, even though he's got this, you know, old man moves and making it awkward for Dubois to hit him with a right hand. Yeah, that's all fine. You need to add to it. You need to have some, even if you're losing the round, you need to have some kind of offense to keep Dubois a little bit honest. So he can't just, you know, throw all these shots at you and give him all these free punches. You can't allow him to do that. Anyway, it was what it was. Daniel Dubois was several levels above. He takes Trevor Bryan out, and the sky is the limit at this point for Daniel Dubois in terms of getting big fights, you would have thought, because Britain is where it's at when it comes to the heavyweight division. There's obviously Anthony Joshua, there's Tyson Fury, there is people coming up like Joe Joyce, there's even David Adeleye a bit further down the line. He's a prospect at the moment, and so on. So for Daniel Dubois, of course, there's got to mention Dylan White, and that's somebody who Daniel Dubois spoke about post-fight. So, yeah, these are all real possibilities for Dubois to be in big fights. And with the other belts being tied up, with the real belts, as some people would call them, or most people would call them, that makes Daniel Dubois an interesting fight for many people who can't get a title shot. People who can't get to the winner of AJ Usyk or get to Tyson Fury, whose WBC belt is in limbo at the moment. They're looking at Daniel Dubois with a WBA regular and they say, well, that's a good consolation prize, or that's a good placeholder for now until I manage to get one of the legit belts. So I think Daniel Dubois is in a good position. I know some people are going to deride the belt, or it's not the real WBA belt. And actually, Dubois made a mistake in the run-up to the fight when he said that David Haye had this belt. David Haye didn't have this belt. David Haye had the full WBA belt up until he fought Klitschko. And after the Klitschko fight is when the WBA created this super champion thing. So David Haye had the full WBA belt, the only WBA belt that existed at the time when he fought Klitschko. You go back and check the records and all that. So it's not the same belt that David Haye had actually, because the belt that David Haye had effectively is what the super champion with the WBA is now. Effectively, that's what it was. Anyway, regardless of all that, I still think it's a nice achievement for Daniel Dubois to even win this secondary belt, just from a career progression standpoint, because, as I say, it should make big fights easier to secure for him. Because when you're as dangerous as Daniel Dubois, and he is dangerous, people are not going to be rushing to fight you unless you have something they want, which he now potentially does. Now, as far as Dubois' performance, because, I've spoken about how comical and poor Trevor Bryan's performance was. As far as Dubois' performance, well, people are looking for improvements under Shane McGuigan. And the improvements or the changes are relatively subtle, I would say. There isn't anything dramatic and dramatically different about Dubois' style here. I was hoping to see Dubois become a bit more fluid, have a bit more upper body movement. I know he's never going to be Tyson Fury in terms of fluidity, but Dubois is quite upright and rigid, a bit mechanical, very Bruno-esque. He's like Bruno with more bounce in his legs. That's how Daniel Dubois is. That's how he fights. And so I was hoping for a bit more suppleness in the upper body, a bit more movement in the waist, and so on. Didn't really see that here against Trevor Bryan. Didn't need it, but we still didn't see it. Now, Shane McGuigan is a trainer that understands biomechanics very well. Talks about biomechanics, understands biomechanics. And if you see the work he's done with Lawrence Piccoli, he has made Lawrence Piccoli a lot more fluid, a lot more, some people are going to scream at their computers when I say this, a lot more slick than he was before. I'm not saying that he's Pernell Whitaker, but if you compare Piccoli before he was with McGuigan to the Piccoli now, he's definitely a slicker fighter. It's quite clear for you to see this. So I thought, okay, if he can do that with Lawrence Piccoli, maybe he can do something somewhat similar with Daniel Dubois, where he adds a bit more fluidity to his motion and whatever. But we haven't seen that so far. And perhaps McGuigan feels like Dubois biomechanically is not capable of it. Maybe that's what it is. I remember Adam Booth years ago when David Haye knocked out Derek Chisora. Booth said that he was happy with the way David Haye finished the fight with a left hook, because David Haye's not a left hooker. Now, to the uninitiated, they would think, that's a strange thing to say. What do you mean David Haye's not a left hooker? He's a professional athlete. He's a, boxer that had a good amateur career, and by the time he fought Chisora, he was a veteran pro. What do you mean he's not a left hooker? What, you can't throw a left hook? Well, when it comes to biomechanics, some people find it more difficult than others to throw certain punches or to to execute certain moves or certain actions because their biomechanics are just not conducive to that particular action. And it can be something as seemingly simple as a left hook. Some guys find it difficult just naturally to throw a left hook. They find it an awkward punch. And so there may be some of you, and this is really going to blow your minds, right? There may be some of you who throwing a left hook comes more naturally to you than it does to David Haye. How about that? Oh, yes. It doesn't mean you're going to be as good a fighter as David Haye, obviously. But for some of you, like hitting the pads, throwing a left hook might come more naturally to you than it does to David Haye. He always found it awkward and difficult to throw a left hook. Now, of course, he did throw them in fights, but very often when he would throw them, there'd be awkward-looking shots. Like the shot that knocked out Chisora was almost a southpaw left hand. He almost threw it from a southpaw position. From an orthodox position, Haye really wasn't big on left hooks. Biomechanically, he found it an awkward shot to throw. Unlike the fighter he patterned his style on, Roy Jones, who was absolutely effortless with the left hook. And that's why Roy Jones threw a lot more left hooks than David Haye, because it came a lot more naturally to him. See, David Haye is much more natural with a straight right hand. And some people, I've seen this many times over the years in gyms, some people just biomechanically find it very difficult to throw a straight right hand. Or they find it very difficult to get any power in a straight right hand. They can get power on a looping right hand, an overhand right, but when it comes to throwing the right hand straight, they find it so difficult. Whereas with other people, they throw a straight right hand naturally. Just from street fights, they'll just throw a straight right hand absolutely perfectly straight naturally. It all comes down to the biomechanics. So with Daniel Dubois, again, I'm just speculating, is it the case that Shane McGuigan feels biomechanically Dubois is just never going to be able to have any extra suppleness, fluidity with upper body movement and all this kind of thing, and therefore let's not waste time trying to get him to be more fluid because he's really not capable of being that much more fluid. Let's work on the strengths that he has, work around the weaknesses, work around the limitations, etc. Is that the case? I don't know. I'm just speculating here because he has been with Shane McGuigan for several fights now, and he still appears to be very stiff and upright. So make of that what you will. But regardless of all that, I thought it was a good performance by Dubois. He's certainly a very heavy-handed young man. He's got a very good jab. Again, reminiscent of Frank Bruno. If any of you are maybe younger and you didn't watch a lot of Frank Bruno growing up or whatever, Bruno had an excellent jab. Say what you want to say about him. He was a limited heavyweight, yes, but he had a fantastic jab. His jab, for my money, wasn't as snappy as Daniel Dubois' jab. Dubois' jab is a bit more snappy, but they're similar. Both long, solid, powerful jabs. I mean, you go back and look at Frank Bruno when he fought Lennox Lewis. That was a battle of the jabs in many ways, that fight. And Bruno was winning the battle of the jabs against somebody who's a great jabber. Somebody who had a faster, snappier jab than he had. But Bruno's timing with the jab was very good. And he was consistent. And as I say, the jab was like a telegraph pole. It was a very, very solid punch. And Dubois, again, reminds me of that with his jab and his stance and all that kind of thing. He's like Bruno with more bounce in his legs, basically. That's Dubois' whole style. So, yeah, let me know what you guys thought in the comments below or think about Dubois' performance, where you see him going from here, who you'd like to see him in the ring with. Some people in my Element group suggested Martin Piccoli for Daniel Dubois, and Piccoli is surely going to be one of the guys who is now hunting Dubois down because Piccoli's unlikely to get an opportunity against the winner of AJ Usyk or Tyson Fury. So someone like Daniel Dubois surely will be the target for Martin Piccoli. And based upon their most recent performances, if Piccoli can produce the kind of form that he showed against Tony Yoka, I'd probably pick him against Dubois, to be honest. I was really quite impressed. That's the first time I've been impressed by Piccoli in the Yoka fight. I might pick him against Daniel Dubois. And I know there's been rumors that Piccoli beat up Dubois in sparring, which Dubois and his team haven't really denied. So make it out what you will. Sparring is sparring. But I think that's a good fight. Daniel Dubois versus Martin Piccoli. I'd definitely like to see it, even though people are going to, like I say, deride the belt and say it's only a regular belt. As long as the fights are good, we're happy, right? And Daniel Dubois versus Martin Piccoli is a great fight. So I'd like to see that one. Perhaps there'll be other fighters from further afield that would like to fight Daniel Dubois. Would Andy Ruiz be interested? I don't know. They'd have to pay him an enormous amount of money. Joseph Parker, who has signed a promotional deal with Boxer, and I'll do a separate video about that. That's a possibility. Would he want a rematch with Joe Joyce? I'm not sure Team Dubois would want to go down that road just yet, because he did get turned over by Joyce. I'm sure Joyce may be interested in the fight, to pick up a regular belt in the meantime while he waits for a proper world title shot. So yeah, anyway, the list is endless. There's the Hrgoviches out there. There are all kind of other people who I'm sure would like to fight Daniel Dubois for this trinket. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below.
If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and is 100% censorship free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.